My wife, Irene, is very fit. She likes working out and has a proper exercise regime, etc. She believes that if she feels good, she looks good, and she feels good working out, so who am I to stop her? My brother, Will, spent the latter half of last year going through a messy divorce and now needs a place to stay. Though my brother and I aren't very close, I figured he would only stay with us for a couple weeks until he got back on his feet. Will is a typical gym rat. He's always on a very strict diet, always working out and bragging about his gains. I've worked out with him a few times and he's a little obnoxious. He's always mad at you if you don't work at his pace and is always trying to correct your form. He's a pretty fit and muscular guy, but I don't like to exercise with him. Will has been pushing Irene to work out with him because, according to him, she won't be able to keep up with him. Irene mostly just shrugs him off with a laugh and tells him she would love to work out with him. Irene works out in the mornings, 3 times a week, and then does a run in the evening. But she's been busy this past week and hasn't been able to stick to her usual schedule. Will thinks that she's making excuses because she doesn't want to be embarrassed by him. Again, Irene just laughs him off. About 2 days ago, Irene and Will went on an early morning run. I didn't go with them, but the first thing I heard when Will entered the house was, "The only reason I couldn't keep up with you, Irene, is because you were sweating too much." I found this extremely comical, and kinda just laughed him off. Irene rolled her eyes and went to take a shower, so I thought that the conversation would die. However, Will just kept bringing up my wife's sweat. My wife went to work and he told her to make sure she doesn't sweat through her clothes, or when she called me in the middle of day. He yelled, "Tell the sweaty." I said hi. Of course, the comment aggravated me and I told him to knock it off and stop acting like a child. I thought that was the end of it, but he just kept going. By the end of the day, I was tired of his comments, but Irene seemed rather unfazed by them. When she served him food, he made a comment about her sweating into the food. At this point, I was at my wit's end and I told him to stop acting like a slow, referring to his running pace, loser, and eat his food. Will, of course, got angry, and said the only reason he was going slower than usual was because he was distracted by my wife's unhygienic sweat. Irene looked a bit offended by this, and I told Will that I would kick him out if he made another comment like that. He's been super pissed ever since. I jokingly told this story to a mutual friend and they agreed with Will. Maybe I shouldn't be so harsh. I didn't expect this amount of responses. I've decided to kick him out. He will be staying at a nearby hotel now. I don't want to go into tons of details. You need to know that for the last 7 years I have not been at home. And during this time my 2 brothers and sisters were still living there. While I was at home, our stepfather abused us mentally and physically. We lived in crappy houses that were covered in real garbage, including animal feces, absolutely everywhere. I haven't heard from my little sister since May. I'm pretty sure she was told to cut contact with all of us. We are her older siblings. My second sister, after my younger sister, is overweight and has spinal problems and has to diet and see a specialist she is not taken to. I told the social worker that I wanted to check on them because they were in a sorry state and because I'm not sure if there is still any physical or psychological abuse going on in the house. This genuinely worries me. I told them what happened to us, hitting walls, throwing things at us, swearing, belittling our character, etc. And told them repeatedly that I really just want to know what my younger brothers and sisters are not the same living conditions as they were. My husband supported me during the call and agreed that it was the right thing to do. All my siblings discussed this beforehand, except for my older sister, who moved out before things got bad, and the 2 who live in the house. We all agreed that this would at least let them know they were being watched and we weren't just disappointed in them, and maybe my mother and SD would keep the house clean nose, etc. CPS contacted my mother very quickly. Much faster than I expected. I mean within 3 hours. After that, my older sister, who lives far away and hasn't contacted me for months, calls and she gets mad at me because she knows I called. I didn't deny anything and just said, if they have nothing to hide, then they have nothing to worry about. It will all be over pretty quickly, to which she replied, what if it doesn't? If they are taken away? I said, I hope it doesn't come to that, and if it does, it's not on me. I didn't harm them. I didn't leave animal excrement around the house. I asked, would you let your children live the way we lived? She didn't answer. I asked again and she said, no. I'd keep a decent house, but it's not your job to tell someone else how to parent. I said, okay. So, if that's all, why did you call? I think we're done. She told me that we all need to get over what happened to us and move on. She left long before the violence started and she wasn't around, regardless of my personal experience. I can't help but feel like I did something wrong. I have limited contact with my mother because of her husband, and she denies that any of us have ever been abused. My sister asked, why don't you just come in and see the conditions? I told her, I can't be around my stepfather. I refuse to expose myself to this negativity again. Even though my husband and siblings agree that it was the right thing to do, I still can't help feeling wrong because of it. Like it wasn't my place. But if it wasn't my place, then whose was it? I really would like a third-party opinion on what I did. Am I wrong in reporting my family? Honestly, should I have just kept my mouth shut? I don't mind if I don't have any contact with my mom or older sister. They don't even know that I'm almost 4 months pregnant because we don't talk very much. So the possibility that I'll never have a real relationship doesn't bother me. What worries me is that I don't know if I was right. I called my mother's CPS based on previous experiences of psychological and physical abuse by our stepfather. I have not heard anything from my younger brothers and sisters for a long time, because communication was interrupted. We lived in appalling conditions. There were animal feces, rubbish and mess everywhere. We were beaten, things were thrown at us, etc. I told the police that I was not sure if something was going on for sure because, again, no contact. But I wanted them to check on my siblings. Was I completely out of sorts? I have 3 fingers missing on my dominant hand. It's fine. I can type and everything and even manage to tie my shoelaces most days, and on the days I can't, that's the dyspraxia. However, I won't deny that it looks a bit odd to most people. I only have my 4th and 5th fingers, so my hand looks a bit like a child's drawing of a rabbit, and not a good one. I'm used to people asking about it, usually after staring for a good minute or 2, but I still find it annoying. I really don't get why you'd think it would be an okay thing to ask someone about, but hey, I wasn't raised in a barn. Usually I nip the questioning in the bud by just explaining the truth from the get-go, and assuming that enough people will gossip about it that the message will spread by the end of the day. It always does. Anyway, I started a new job about a month ago, and I honestly could not face going through that same cycle again. I felt like the time had come to not play into it anymore and to make something out of it, and I decided to make myself laugh. When the first new coworker asked about it, I completely lied and told her that I chewed them off as a baby. I then decided to tell the next person who asked that I cut them off with a plastic knife at a picnic. And the next person that I was born with 6 fingers and they removed too many, and so on. All genuinely ridiculous reasons, but I'm a good actor and they actually believed my stupid lies. I didn't expect them to, a plastic knife, through bone, but there you go. Maybe they just thought there's no way I'd lie about how I lost my fingers. Within about 3 days, I learned that my coworkers had been arguing about the actual reason, and it seems like a lot of them now actively dislike me for lying to them. I'm probably going to have to make some cupcakes over the weekend with my super cool 3D printed adaptive whisk to get back into their good books. Anyway, I told this story to my brother today and he told me that I was an asshole because I caused tension within the office on my first day and made people feel stupid for being gullible and believing my lies. My argument is that I'm not the asshole because they were asking a rude, albeit common, question and because I didn't do it with the intention of deceiving them. I was just honestly fed up of the question and didn't think they'd think I actually severed 3 fingers with dental floss when I was 3. I'll accept my judgment, though. Not cool to ask people why they lost limbs or digits just because you want to sate your morbid curiosity. A few reminders for people: I'm not a male. Don't know why everyone assumed that. Don't ask people about something that could be traumatic, especially when you don't actually know them. So I recently got together with a guy from my hobby. He asked me out first and I had some doubts that we'd work together as a couple because of the age difference. He's 35 and I'm 22. So, in my apartment, since it's an old house that was originally a single-family house, there isn't much soundproofing. And the floors creak when people move. I've gotten used to the sound of the guy upstairs getting up at 4 a.m. since he starts work at 5. And the sound of the girls in the apartments to either side of mine watching telenovelas till midnight. Taking work calls all day and having friends over on weekend nights. I know when I play music or have friends over, some of the sound leaks through the walls. So I'd never get upset about hearing my neighbors because it goes both ways. So, when my boyfriend started coming over more often, he had complaints about the neighbors, which put me in an awkward place. He wanted to go speak to them or have me text them and I said no. For example, one of the early times he stayed over we went to bed around 10. He wanted me to ask my neighbor to turn down her TV. I said she didn't have it that loud and she turns it off at midnight anyway. At 4 a.m., he got very irritated with my upstairs neighbor getting up and cooking breakfast. I said that he would be done by 5 because that's when his shift starts. At 7 a.m., he was still trying to sleep in and the neighbor on the other side had some work calls that he said he couldn't sleep through. I offered him earplugs and he said he couldn't sleep with them in either. He wanted me to ask her to quiet down. He had similar comments every time he heard someone else in the building just living their life, especially if it was when he was in bed. I got frustrated with my boyfriend and told him, you can't expect to date a hot young 22-year-old and not want to deal with a 22-year-old's living situation. I don't know if you realize, but this is a normal apartment for someone my age. Hell, my neighbors are pretty great. Nobody's throwing loud parties on work nights. Nobody's having screaming fights. Nobody's having babies. The hot young part was in sarcastic air quotes because those were his words, not mine. He got irritated and asked why I was bringing age into it. And I said it's because he can't both want someone so young and also want someone with house kinda money. And he was being so out of touch with how normal people in their 20s live. He got really irritated with me bringing age into it. And even more annoyed when I'd respond to his neighbor complaints in the future with, okay, boomer. Or tell him that if he wanted me to have a rich person apartment, he could pay for it. It's not possible for me to get to his house on my own because I don't have a car and the buses don't go that far into the suburbs. So that would mean him driving 30 minutes from his house in the suburbs to pick me up, then an extra 30 to drive me to his house. Then an hour round trip early in the morning to get me home in time for work. It's a lot easier for him to visit me in the city. I am using boomer as a joke or a figure of speech to say acting out of touch and entitled to tell other people what to do. It is a common figure of speech to say, okay, boomer, to someone who is acting entitled regardless of their actual age. It's more of a mindset thing. I googled his property records for his house and he owns it with a woman who shares his last name. Holy shit. I don't know if she's his wife or ex-wife or what, but I'm out of here. I'm honestly freaking out right now, but I just gotta say, great big thank you to everyone who noticed red flags and made me question that. I've blocked his number. He can have fun figuring out where I went.